Why are you involved in these politics when you could be resting on your laurels? You've done a lot. Why get involved again?
Yeah, myself, my generation grew up with intense passion for the country and for the people of Ethiopia. It was extremely difficult to think otherwise. Ethiopia is in my heart, Ethiopia is in my mind, and the Ethiopian people I work with for many, many years are always in my mind. So it was difficult to live a life of comfort while our people are suffering and being really exterminated. I lived the life with a full sense of Ethiopian history, with a full sense of the culture which I practice, a religion that I practice. Now it's difficult to see Ethiopia and Ethiopians losing that culture and also forced to give up their identity and pay a price for who they are. So it's difficult. It's extremely difficult to live on my own without really having a sense of contributing to the country and the people I loved.
But your background isn't Amhara itself, is it? You're something else? So you're
I'm Amhara, but
okay.
I was never aware of my own identity because in my generation, as an army officer and later as a civil servant, I always saw myself as an Ethiopian. And so many Ethiopians, so many Amharas do that. Yeah. They had difficulty until recently having two identities, Ethiopian and Amhara. Most of them will tell you they are Ethiopians first. And that's how. And Amhara, I never knew that. I was never fully aware of my identity because I could have been anything. I could have been an Oromo. I never asked my father who his grandfathers are, my mother who her father and grandfather is. I never asked that because it never mattered. It never mattered. As an officer, I served in the Imperial Ethiopian Army. I served with many Oromos, with many Tigrais, and we never ask ourselves who we are. And we never ask another person who they are.
No one cared.
Nobody cared. And I have many of the army officers I work with have perished now, and they perish with the Ethiopian flag around them. So it never mattered. Now, the Wayane, the TPLF ideology, made us realize that after all, we are Amharas, and we are being killed, murdered, and marginalized for who we are. And I had to go in and intervene just to protect my people, But I'm first Ethiopian, still an Ethiopian, and second Amhara.
You've met Eskinder Nega. This gentleman is a legend back in the country, but the thing is, people don't probably, if people knew him in the United States or in Europe, they might have forgotten who he is because it's been a few years. Why should people listen to this gentleman as opposed to all the other voices in terms of Ethiopia? Why should people care what he has to say as opposed to anybody else?
Yeah, we have seen many leaders in Ethiopia who studied Ethiopia and involved in Ethiopian politics. And lately we have seen many people working for the cause of Amharas who believed that they were Amharas. And we have seen many leaders. So it's all about comparing him with all the other leaders we had and we have at this moment. Eskinder Nega is very special. He's not from my generation. He's much younger than I am. He grew up from a different generation, and despite that, he is extremely Ethiopian. He studied Ethiopian history. He is deeply religious and very, very correct in many ways. So it's difficult to find a person like Eskinder who completely abandoned his own personal life and stood for the cause of Ethiopia. First, Ethiopia. Eskinder was an Ethiopian. When he started the struggle, it's not for Amharas, for Ethiopian unity. But after being imprisoned so many times, he found out that the Amhara cause was just, and the only way that he can contribute to the cause of Amharas was going to aligning himself with the Fanos, and the Fanos are basically a protective force for the culture and integrity of Amharas. So he joined them, and his cause is the prevention of genocide, prevention of Amharas from being exterminated, the preventing Oromos from destroying the religious institution in Ethiopia, the Coptic Church. That was his cause. He's deeply religious, he's deeply patriotic, and that's why the motto of his movement is, we begin with the integrity of Amhara and we end up with the unity of Ethiopia. So he has both causes. He fights for both causes.
They're already labeling Fano in the Western press as radical, as extremist, as militants. What do you say to that?
No, it's absolutely different. This Fano is standing for the people of Amhara. Amharas are being displaced in millions. I have worked on the genocide of Amharas. I'm a lawyer. First, I'm a lawyer. I studied law and I practiced law for many years, international law and domestic law. So I was working for 2.5 years voluntarily on genocide in Ethiopia. There has been genocide in Ethiopia and continues to be genocide in Ethiopia, because I know what genocide means. It's not just using the word, the phrase. It is in literally there is going on genocide in Ethiopia. Systematically. I went to ICRC. I talked to the Prosecutor General. I talked to lawyers in the ICC, and both of us presented the document, and there was no doubt that there was genocide going on in Ethiopia. They believed it based on the documents we presented. So genocide. So it was just genocide, and in the real sense, that is the noblest cause. Trying to prevent the genocide is the most noble cause. That's what AFP is about. That's what eventually triggered this movement, triggered the reorganization, the re-emergence of Fanos, because Fanos were traditionally there to protect the integrity of Ethiopia, the rights of Ethiopia, the human rights of Ethiopians. So now we see the resurgence of Ethiopia, of Fanos.
Can you win?
Oh, well, absolutely, because it's not, the Fano is not necessarily a very organized military institution. It's the people. It is the people. 100% of Amharas today, 100% of Amharas in rural Ethiopia are with Fanos, period. No one in this world, no one who knows Ethiopia can refute this. It is the reality. Fanos are there and they will fight to the end, because this is the people's war. What we are trying to do is trying to help them in organizing themselves first, and trying to help an organized movement, so that when eventually they reach Addis Ababa, and that's what they are organized for, and that's what the program tells us, we will win and we will take over Addis Ababa. But when we reach Addis Ababa, if they reach Addis Ababa, they will reach Addis Ababa. But if they do that, then it needs to be an orderly change.
I like to think that I know how Western people think and Western journalists think. I think the first thing that they will come to mind if you reach Addis is they'll go, there'll be reprisals against other ethnic groups. That would be the first thing in their heads.
No, look here. Jeff, I'm quite sure you've watched this. Amharas now, when they're fighting the war, Fanos, have thousands and thousands of Oromo prisoners. When Oromos have prisoners, they kill, they murder, and they put them in mass graves. That's what I've seen. It's documented, and we can show it to the international community anytime they want to. They bury the prisoners and they kill them, and not only shooting them, but mutilating them. They bury them. That's what they did, and we have seen that. Now, when the Amhara Fanos had so many prisoners, Oromo prisoners, fighters, they fed them. It was incredible. It was an incredible scene. They fed them, they treated them, and they put them in just where their security is properly maintained. They put them. The villagers came out in dozens and feeding and encouraging them, and that can't happen anywhere else. No, Amharas are not because they got an order. It is their culture. They never kill. They never kill an innocent person. They don't fight a war with an armed person. No, they don't do that. They're in their tradition. When you have a prisoner, he's treated like another human being. So we saw that. And it was all recorded how they treat their prisoners. So there will be no vindictiveness. There will be no. Oromos are part of us, and we still believe that the majority of Oromos have been really manipulated. that the majority of Oromos don't really believe in what the elites tell them. The majority of Oromos want peace, and they live with Amharas alongside. And they have been forced to consume manufactured history, but otherwise, majority of Oromos don't want to fight with Amharas. No.
The U.S. government seems determined to intrude on this. So if you had to tell them something, what do you want them to know most? Because they seem determined to inject themselves into this process of whichever of Ethiopian current events, whether they're wanted or not. They're determined to be involved. So what would you want to tell them that they should know?
American policy on Africa has always been either naive or based on complete ignorance of the realities. American policymakers in the State Department don't see the bigger picture in the Horn of Africa. It is the most complex security zone in Africa and probably in the world. It can easily explode and become a prelude to another third world war. But they don't see that. They don't see that. In Africa, they don't see these things, and they do what people who don't properly understand the complex nature of the politics in the Horn of Africa. That's how they make decisions. So we want to tell them that this war in the Horn of Africa, this war in Ethiopia can easily spill over and consume the entire region. And when it consumes the entire region, it means another big war. It is. I was reading a book by Kaplan, says the looming time, something like that.
Yeah.
And he was saying about Africa, Ethiopia, it is the Semitic outpost in Africa. That aspect of it also needs to be considered, that it can easily turn or be a war between the anti-Semites and Semitics. That is part of the problem. The problem is a movement known as the Kush Empire, the construction of the Kush Empire. That's one aspect of it. If that's the case, then it can go beyond Ethiopia to the Kenya and to Somalia and to other places. And then we have another part, that's the Wahhabi movement. The Wahhabi movement always thrives in chaos. It thrives in instability. And it's easily, there is already a Wahhabi movement inside Ethiopia, and that can thrive and be the movement, and violent extremism can be introduced in Ethiopia. So that's one aspect of it. Violent extremism, it's the Kush movement, and then the strategic importance of the Red Sea should be considered, because Ethiopia and the Red Sea, Eritrea is very much part of Ethiopia in terms of security, in terms of geopolitics. It's the Persian Gulf, it is the Red Sea, it is the Suez Canal, it is the Arab interest expansion policy, it's about the Nile, it's so many things. Ethiopia means so many things. So all these interest groups certainly will have their own agendas, and will end up, either it will end up a country with proxy war, or some interventions by some groups. But it's not going to be an easy war. It will be complex. That's why we remind the Americans it will be in their own interest to stop the war now and go for a peaceful change. Whatever government comes up after here, it will be a Western allied with the West, definitely. It's not going to be Russian, it's not going to be Chinese, it's certainly going to be follow the Western values and the Western democracy, with all the problems that this political system has. But that's how it's going to end up. So long as their interest is maintained, why would they go for a destructive regime? It will be wrong, absolutely wrong, to support this regime, not for Ethiopia and not for the entire region and not for the globe.